Welcome to Hyper Live, and today we have a couple of special guests from Auth0. Welcome Tom Lahoud and Sean Spires. And we'll get into today's topic very quickly, which is balancing the agentic innovation opportunity with security. I know this is something that a lot of folks in the industry in both Australia and New Zealand are thinking about. But before we jump in, Tom, Sean, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Tom Lahoud. I'm the head of Auth0 for Australia and New Zealand. For those that don't know, Auth0 is an authentication and authorization as a service provider. So we're all the front door for every brand that you know and love. Every day you're relying on apps like where you shop online, maybe if you're logging in for your digital ID, driver's license, streaming, telco, all of the brands that you rely on every day rely on Auth0 to secure the front door and make sure it's a personalized and pleasant experience. So that's me.
Morning, Daniel. Morning, Gareth. My name's Sean. I'm a solutions engineer at Auth0. So I work alongside Tom and his team, and I work with customers as they're exploring everything Tom said around customer identity when they want to do innovative things. So my role is a bit more on the product and technical side to assist them with evaluations on how we're going to make this real, either through demonstrations, proof of concepts, and really take what's theoretical from a great customer experience and customer identity and bring it more into reality.
Great, thanks, guys. Well, today we're focusing on the agentic innovation opportunity, and so how does Auth0's platform empower software developers to build what is now the next generation of products and services?
Yeah, I think good question, Gareth. So Auth0 basically is an authentication and authorization as a service provider. So we have hundreds of customers across Australia and New Zealand. We manage over 20 billion authentications every month using Auth0 as the front door to secure user experiences. And the way that we like to think about it when we're talking to product builders is if you're building an application, whether it's a traditional app or something that is agentic in nature, you want to be focusing directly on what your user is trying to achieve, what they're trying to solve, and how it's going to help you differentiate from your competitors, how it's going to help you go to market faster, and ultimately how it's going to achieve outcomes and drive revenue. Identity is such a core part of how your application works in both the traditional sense and the AI sense, but it's often one where it's very difficult to manage on your own. And that's where folks lean on Auth0. Now, building traditional apps and building AI agents are two very different beasts, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about why that's different and what complexities are arising as a result of that. But yeah.
Yeah, I really like that differentiation as well. So AI is being used by engineers, but it's being used in products that engineers are building. And both have authentication and authorization challenges. But Sean, I mean, what are some of the most exciting AI-powered applications you're seeing in Australia and New Zealand at the moment?
Yeah, so I think you really see two categories at the moment in Australia. So you have people bringing AI into their products, so actually building the AI agents, and we've seen some really exciting work happen. For example, Xero rolling out it's Jax, J-I-X, right, Tom, the AI assistant for accounting. We've seen legal tech companies, in the ATI Global Group come up with these amazing AI assistants to review legal matters, summarize documents. And then equally exciting as well is we've seen people actually take their services and products and make them AI ready. So just in the news the other day, we saw realestate.co.au publish their first ChatGPT app where you can actually surface up those insights within ChatGPT as well. So it's a very dynamic field where we're seeing both in the market. We're seeing people build AI assistants very quickly without security guardrails, probably as kind of something they're exploring now, I'd say. And then we also see people expose their services to ChatGPT. And we're sort of seeing the first wave of that where they're kind of exposing the ability for users to just query information, so you don't have to go on Google, you don't have to go into their websites. And then we're seeing companies start to explore thinking, okay, how do we go one step further where you can actually execute and run actions directly from your ChatGPTs or your Claudes of the world?
This is actually probably one of the most common questions that we're being asked right now from teams. And that is, how do we go and make our products ready? Because folks they're seeing all of their traffic really amp up just around agents, machine to machine, trying to scrape content, trying to actually do activities that may not be designed to do, of course, which is definitely standing in the way of their users who obviously are ahead of the curve when it comes to, okay, I want to purchase something online, and that what's being presented to them isn't actually designed for an agent. Because if you think about it, an agent has to do all the things on behalf of the human being. And if you're not set up to meet them there, that's going to hurt.
So what are some of the things that they're doing to make their products and services AI ready?
There are 3 cornerstones. I'll let Sean add to this as well, but you've got the first point of view, which is you've got to authenticate the user. So an agent must be certain that it's acting for the right person, and it must inherit the identity of that person, but it has to be distinct. So it's representing on behalf, but it has to be distinctly that it is an AI, it's an agent. Number 2 is you don't want to be building things like authorization yourself, because those don't actually necessarily differentiate you from your product. If you're an app builder, you want to be building things that move your product forward, but authorization is key. So how do you make sure that the user that is controlling the AI is only able to use that AI based on the consent that they have, the permissions that they have, those flow up and downstream from themselves to the agent. So authorizing the agent, that's number 2. And then the third layer that we're helping builders with is securing the data. So an agent needs to access, often it could be quite innocuous, but sensitive data. Like we see health tech companies, for instance, that are acting as a clinician. So Daniel, Gareth, you go to a clinician and they spend a lot of time taking detailed notes, assessing you. All of that data is stored somewhere. You can think some of that is going to be quite sensitive in its nature. What happens to that sensitive data? So securing patient records or payment information or delivery information may be isolated on its own. It's harmless, but with other contexts, it can become very dangerous and powerful in the wrong hands. So we're giving and building the identity protocols that builders need, so the agent can only explicitly access what the user that is controlling the agent is allowed to access. And all of that comes back to identity. Did I miss anything there, Sean?
Yeah, no, I think last Tuesday or Wednesday, I gave a talk at an AI day. Oh, I can actually, sorry, it's a public event, so I can name it. So it was at the ATI Global's AI Innovation Summit Day. So we were sponsors, so I went down to give a talk on AI, and I saw some phenomenal innovations about what they were doing with AI assistants. And when I went up just to give them a talk, really the main thing that I wanted to highlight is everything to Tom's point, is that these AI agents are a new identity type. It's no longer an old model. What distinguishes a chatbot from an agent is an agent will actually take action.
Yeah.
It actually will do things. And so the way people are getting ready is, I think first you have to recognize that fact. And then when you recognize that fact, then everything Tom just said about the considerations you need, that's what you have to start doing.
Yeah. So one of the things, sorry, go on.
Sorry, Tom, you go.
No, I was just going to say that to Sean's point, one of the things that I always ask when I'm in a room with, we meet with a lot of engineering and product teams, and I usually poll the room. I ask, how many of you are experimenting, prototyping with AI, either making your product AI ready or trying to build a new experience into your existing product? 80% of the room always raise their hand, right? They always, put up their hand, and like they're also using AI as a co-pilot or a companion to help them with efficiency around building. But then you ask them to keep their hands up if those, like how many of them are going into production? So how many of you are pushing these apps out, shipping these apps out, these experiences out? And only a few hands usually remain. And it turns out that what's really driving that is the security concern. So Gareth, we were talking last week about this, but because of these AI agents being so unpredictable, so non-deterministic, the fear that the CIO and your CTOs have is, well, there's so much unpredictability and nervousness that we would rather be a little bit late to the, like everyone wants to be first to the party, innovate, bring that experience, but we're also super concerned about what we're going to unleash if we were to do this. Are we going to be on the front page if we go and start too quickly? And that's the part that we're trying to solve, is how do you solve that point?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think it connects to some previous guests' commentary around, there's the identity side, but then there's also the data and the preparedness of the data and the structure of the data to actually be able to access. But tell us more about what guardrails are you able to support organisations put in place from a governance perspective?
It goes back to, again, two distinctions. Are we bringing AI into our products? Are we making our products AI ready? But both have the same considerations for security. And I think this is something that we're all figuring out. The joke I like to make, it's a very lame joke, but you always say the S in MCP stands for security. Obviously, it's not there. The S in AI stands for security. So this is something that we're all figuring out and something we need to be top of mind. But when it comes to building these AI agents and how do we make them secure, as I said, putting guardrails around them, as I said, the first thing you have to recognize, this is a different identity type. This is not your standard traditional model of building software. So then once you identify that, I think Tom's already brought it up, but I'll just go over it again. The important thing for guardrails is, first of all, your AI agent has to know who is the user that they're doing things on behalf of. So you need some form of authentication. Then what you need, and I think this is the next important one, which a lot of people, when they hear this, it makes sense. You need a way for the AI agent to not be over permissioned. You want them to only act in the user context. So, I'm just making up this example, so it might not be right. But imagine you're checking into a hotel and there's a butler there that can do things on behalf of you. We essentially have two choices, right? You can either give that butler a master key and he can do everything, and you just have to hope that when I check into the hotel, he just does the right things and is authorized and does everything is. Or when I get to the hotel, I can just give him my key, which will just do what I'm allowed to do, and then he can go off and do things for me. So we also need a way to make sure that instead of over provisioning these AI agents, we follow the standard principles of least privilege and just give them the access they need. The next thing after that is making sure, okay, even if we've given them the access they need, we need to really make sure that they can only access authorized information. So when those AI agents go into your database, we really have to make sure that there are strong guardrails around that we can't trick the AI agent into giving me data that I don't have access to. And then the final one, which I think is quite interesting that people need to think about more, is also human in the loop approval. That as these AI agents get better and better, before they execute really sensitive transactions, we should have some form of human approval before they go off and do it. I don't think AI agents are mature enough where we can delegate all responsibility over to them without having some form of human approval. Yeah. So if I had to summarize it, the guardrails are really simple. Identify the user to the AI agent, ensure that the AI agent has the principles of least privilege and we only give them access to the user's permissions. Ensure that even after we do that, we really lock down authorization and information in databases and other stores that you can't trick the AI agent into giving you more. And then finally have some form of human in the loop approval that the user can actually approve. I mean, imagine we had a stock trading bot which misread your intentions and bought $1 million worth of shares without you knowing. We can't have that. We need some form of human approval.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think we're seeing product teams start to innovate around the algorithms that they use with AI as well. So having those deterministic checks, whether they're a human in the loop or using AI to be able to search or come back with results that can be deterministically checked in some way. But that's definitely an evolving space, isn't it, in terms of how those guardrails get applied?
It is.
It's changing every day. Yeah. And I think that's one of the challenges that these builders are telling us, which is that, there's a board level expectation or there's an organizational level expectation that these sorts of innovative experiences need to be built into their application. If you have an existing application, it's how do we go and make sure that we're presenting these new experiences to where our users, where our customer base actually want to meet us. Because I don't know about you guys, but I am searching more through my LLM than I am in Google now. I want to be met where I am, and that's where I think a lot of executives and where a lot of leadership teams are thinking, well, how do we make sure that we're not missing out? We still have our competitive advantage. So there's that. But then if you think about from the point of view of the landscape changing and just how fast it's changing, there are things that, you know, a CISO, for instance, or a CIO, they can do now to even just understand just how complex it is in their organization. Because the shadow AI usage is just going absolutely insane. It's rogue. It's incredible. I can guarantee you, if you have employees in your organization, just for their own operational efficiency, they're using LLMs to do their work. Some of it will be sanctioned. Some of it's going to be unsanctioned. And you don't know what they're putting into these agents, into these models. So there has to be a lot of governance. But before governance can actually happen, the organization itself needs to have a way of actually discovering just what is actually taking place from within the enterprise. But there are some other things that cause this unknown risk. Like, for instance, we talk about this idea of not having a view of API inventory. So most teams don't have a complete up-to-date inventory of all the internal APIs and systems, and also external open APIs and systems. You can't secure what you don't know you have. So there's that. And then in addition, there's internal application services where we've always just assumed that, you know, behind a firewall, behind the network, behind the edge. But if an AI agent is living inside that wall, then they can access any endpoint that it can find. So from an internal perspective, that landscape is changing super fast. And then there's one other element where we're seeing, I guess, a lot of concern, and that is that when builders are trying to build these experiences into their products, they're hard coding a lot of the stuff that for years and years and years, best practice identity and access management basically taught us how to solve, which is you decouple identity from the application layer, even though the application is a front door. It's bound to the confines of the application. Now that AI opens that up, these developers, these product builders are so gung-ho to make sure that these experiences are being kept up with where users expect to be. We end up seeing some really, Sean, I don't know how you would refer to it, kind of shady practices, like hard coding tokens and just not really considering the scopes of users. All of these things are creating an inherent amount of risk and anxiety for our customers.
Tom, you mentioned you had an example, someone you met on public transport who was asking, saw you were from Auth0 and was asking you questions about this. So is this the impact of AI engineering and the increased pace to getting new capability out there, but maybe unintentionally cutting corners?
Yeah, it's a good call out, Daniel, because there is an inherent expectation to be more efficient as builders, as knowledge workers, and that these tools have so much promise and magic behind them, how much they can do for us now. With that, of course, there's a level of faith and trust that we're putting into these. I don't know if we call it the religiosity of AI, but we are in unprecedented times now where we're believing and trusting so much of what these models are coming back and spitting out, and also what we're providing them. And we're seeing the reluctance and the cause for concern up above in terms of from a leadership standpoint. But then there's also an extreme amount of pressure for us to adopt AI internally, but also to bring it out to our customers. So if you're a product organization, and I think Sean mentioned one with realestate.com, they've announced a partnership with OpenAI where, their users can now, instead of, like you can go to ChatGPT and you can ask ChatGPT to go log into my account and go and look for properties now that meet this criteria in this area and save them into my wish list and then contact the agent with that is real. That is coming, right? Where soon you won't even need to go to realestate.com at all to interact, be a customer, be a user of realestate.com. And if you're trying to think about how to get your leadership team to invest seriously and take seriously the opportunity and also the security risk that is AI, they need to understand what's actually being left on the table. As in, it can unlock incredible growth, but it can also mean incredible risk for the organization. And they need to understand both. I think there's an intuition that they have that this stuff is dangerous, but just how exposed, how dangerous it can be, they probably don't. And that's where you, as a builder, can set yourself apart and educate your leadership about.
I think it's a good call out. I think there's a genuine tension there. It's, at all levels of the organization. You've got executives who are worried that they need to keep up with the competition, which means they need to start to adopt some of these kind of new ideas in terms of how they deliver products and AI and the products themselves. But at the same time, the governance models maybe can't quite keep up with that rate of adoption. So it creates risk, but it's a really difficult position, I think, for a lot of executives at the moment and a lot of team members. But maybe tell us a little bit more about some of those attack vectors and vulnerabilities that engineers should be more aware of.
Yeah. I'll take a quick stab at this one first. So look, the way that we think about this, Gareth and Daniel, is that the primary vulnerability, the new vulnerability, is the non-deterministic nature of the agent itself. So unlike a traditional app I mentioned before, where you can predict the user's actions, they're confined within a sandbox kind of environment behind the login, etc. It's in the walls of the application for the most part. Agents go off script. They can spawn other agents. They can reason. They can go and look for information that you didn't necessarily ask it to go and look at, and they can make conclusions postulating based on the user's intentions. That's what they're actually designed to do, to kind of, to reinforce the detected biases or what they think the user's ultimate objective is in the prompt they're initiating. So it's opening up all these new kind of these vectors. The first one is, and Sean and his team are seeing this a lot, is unconstrained access. So if you're not properly sandboxed, an agent can probe and access internal systems where they weren't, they were never meant to be exposed to. So there was a breach at McDonald's in the US where they were using a chatbot to take new employment applications in. So all these employees were submitting their CVs, etc., all sorts of sensitive information, payment information, all that sort of stuff. An internal API was discovered and exploited by the chatbot itself, and it was doing all sorts of things, and it ended up exposing a whole heap of sensitive candidate information. So that's a clear example of unconstrained access. Couldn't predict, didn't know where it was going to go, thought it was going to be fine, and in traditional application building it is. I think number two, and Sean actually covered this, privilege escalation. So having the least amount of scope and permissions always, like that should be the default baseline. An agent, we've seen agents that can trick other systems into giving it access to data. So data that the user that's controlling the agent may not have had access or authorization to see. And that's an attack that's absolutely wild to kind of witness. Any thoughts from you, Sean?
No, I think everything you said spot on. I think the thing I'd emphasize is identity attacks are already the number one attack vector for cybersecurity. And the way that people are building these AI agents now is if you're building these AI agents to kind of be super agents, and without thinking about, okay, how can we actually give them the principles of least privilege? then that 80% becomes a hell of a lot more dangerous, because unlike an attacker stealing Tom's identity and then doing damage, if you can steal somehow an agent's identity, then you can do damage to everybody. So that is the biggest concern, is tricking agents. They're non-deterministic. And if you sort of architect them wrong, a prompt injection, like the McDonald's example, can be very, very, very dangerous.
Yeah, there's that other topic there, Sean, that Daniel and Gareth, we've actually seen quite a bit with a lot of SaaS vendors that are building these prototypes where they're testing them extensively. There's a lot of maturity there around, obviously, their technology stack, the way they architect software, but we're seeing data leakage through reasoning. So this, I guess the example would be an agent, inadvertently leaks sensitive information by combining a bunch of indiscriminately kind of innocuous, non-sensitive data points that if you're the CIO or the CISO, it's like, well, I don't really mind if that on its own in isolation is, visible, exposed. But when you piece that together with a bunch of other things, causation, correlation, people can go and identify, like, take example, like, enough documentation, enough kind of non-sensitive data points pieced together to deduce the name of an M&A, some sort of merger or acquisition. This is the real world that we're living in now.
Yeah. This is a concept that was always present. It's called mosaic theory for private investigation, but now it can be done en masse. And in the same way you're describing agents within a company, the risk is it's like insider risk, but it's just magnified because agents can do it so much more often. Yeah, it's incredible.
And faster.
Bigger than insider risk, because we don't even know. Every day you see people jail. I follow this person on Instagram, and his whole page is called Jailbreaking ChatGPT. Like, the whole point is every single week he comes up with new ways to trick agents and do different things. So yeah, Daniel, it's like insider risk, but just don't know. Every single day we're learning more ways to trick the insider.
Yeah, and what advice? There are lots of challenges here for engineering teams and leaders and organisations to navigate. What advice can you give them in terms of giving more confidence and shipping features to production that leverage AI in development or leverage AI in the product? What advice can you give people? How can they? What are some of the questions they need to be asking, or what are the things that they should be looking out for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I can take a stab at this, Tom, from a builder's point of view, which is, I kind of put this in two camps. Like, as builders, we need to be pushing out new AI features. We need to be delivering this, because otherwise your competition is going to. But I think the advice I would give is sort of take one step back just for a second and recognize this is a new identity type, and we can't just approach this with the same models we have to previous software development, methodology. So we need to take a step back, recognize these AI agents are a new identity type, and we really have to realize that with the AI agents, with everything we've been talking about, identity security is AI agent security. And so we have to be thinking, are we actually architecting this in the right way? Are we treating the AI agents as a different identity type? Have we got the guardrails in place such that if someone were to do things like prompt injection, etc., can this AI agent even be overprivileged to make that a concern? So I think just keeping that in mind. And the good thing about where the industry is going is that, with the likes of Anthropic publishing MCP, with the OIDC and OAuth specs, the guardrails are kind of there for us to follow along. So it's just making sure that we're ensuring we're adhering to those protocols as well.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's a great point, and I think we can generalize a little bit in terms of any good engineering practices, right? Like, anything that has holes in it is now amplified. So if we're leveraging really good auth practices, but also just really good modern engineering practices, then that's probably one of the biggest safety nets we can kind of wrap around this as well.
Totally, that's a really good point, and that actually is something that I wanted to cover here when I was thinking, listening to Sean talk about this, the practice, Gareth, the best practices that we have been and have adopted and as builders have been deploying into our applications. Just because now the architecture is shifting and we're seeing the way that software is being built has shifted, doesn't mean the principles, the core principles of, going from the monolith to microservices, and then, having your segregation of sensitive data into separate services, those principles should always remain true. So, like, if I was a builder today, coming up with a plan of how we're going to, get AI right, and to get AI right, you have to get identity right. The first thing that I would be thinking about is starting with data governance, not AI governance. And what I mean by that, I mean, if you think about the gap between experimenting with AI and shipping it into production, that's a real gap. Only 20% of AI projects today so far that Sean and our teams have seen is making it to production. That means 95% of them are either not shipping or they're doing it, but it's not actually effective. It's not profitable. It's not working. So to get at right, you got to start with what we call data governance. So even before you think about AI features, you got to be thinking about, well, what data does an AI or any API, third party or our own, need to have, and where does it live, and who should have access to it? Building an inventory of that data is just good practice in general, and then classifying that data by sensitivity level, customer information, internal, external documents, all sorts of things. It's not glamorous work, but no matter how cool whatever you're building is, if you don't have this data governance right, it makes no difference, one iota of difference. That's the foundation. So having a data governance strategy first and classifying data by sensitivity. And then the other piece that we advise our customers on is building a centralized, or I'd say a decentralized, building a centralized authorization framework from day one. So don't treat each AI feature as a one-off security problem. I mean, for a traditional app, authorization should really be decoupled from your app anyway. As a service, it should be decoupled, but create a system that manages your permissions, Gareth, across all your applications, across all your APIs, across your chatbots. So this means that when your agent wants to access a database or call an API, it has to go through a centralized policy engine. And this is something that Sean's team is always talking about with our customers. That's how you get consistency across your data governance. So you have the foundation of data governance, and then you have the centralized policy management, and then building human in the loop for high stakes actions. You could build it yourself, or you could use a service like Auth0 for AI to do it for you. But anything that involves sensitive data, irreversible actions, giving user the final approval is essential. So I can walk away from an AI, and when I come back to it, it's prompted me and said, hey, I've gone and completed this task. Here's what I found for you. These are 2 actions that I can take. Which one would you like me to take? And maybe it's so sensitive, I need to step up the verification and make sure that this person is still the same person before it executes. So explicit user consent. Building that stuff is actually really hard, Gareth. So making sure you're spending your product and engineering time on the stuff that matters, which is building your product to be amazing. That's where you should be focusing, and then relying on a service to do it for you that you can trust. That's key.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? We see that over and over again. As new technology or concepts come into across different organizations, you've got to pick what you want to build, where you want to spend your money in terms of building, and where you want to leverage the products that have the right kind of economic value. But that's probably a pretty good place to wrap up today. But thanks, guys. We covered a fair bit of ground, talking about from some of the challenges that industry are facing, from executives through to teams, some of the tensions there, but also some great practical advice in terms of identifying vulnerabilities through to how can we get more value out to customers more?
I love that distinction of the AI products from AI ready products. I think that's been aware of it, but I think it was really a really good call out. Hey, Tom and Sean, is there any places you'd like to direct some of our viewers towards where they can check out some more resources to learn more?
We talk to, we have hundreds of organizations that rely on Auth0 every day, but we talk to a lot of builders, and it's really important to us that they have the ability to go and actually play and build and create some cool stuff. So there's Auth0 where we have lots of documentation about the APIs, the SDKs, the frameworks that we've built that you can go and implement into your prototypes, or you can put them into production now as well. But we've built 4 key tools for builders, 5 if you consider Auth for MCP, to make your product AI ready. But we've built some key tools so that builders can focus on actually making their app, shipping features that are going to differentiate them from their competitors. So Auth0 is one place I direct folks to play around with and take a look at. There's a place called SaaStart.app, which you can put on the screen. SaaStart is this amazing playground that we've built where you can go and sandbox. Sean's team's always playing with this one. It's particularly for if you're building a B2B application. A lot of the capabilities that we've been talking about today at the human level, at the agent level, you can go and play around in this sandbox. And then the last one on the screen is auth0.com/fine-grained authorization. The AI tools that we're building are really a collection or an abstraction of the amazing products that we've built for humans. Human users, human identities, machine identities are now part of that cohort. So our developers, our product community can go and check out the documentation. It's an open source product, and it's a fantastic product for if you're building permissions, if you're building entitlement systems for your application and you don't want to manage it yourself. This does it for you.
This is fantastic. These are all like lowering the friction between having a great idea and getting it into production, with buy-in from the CIO and the CISO and the rest of the exec team. So that's
Daniel, speaking of prototypes, Sean and his team are regularly building these prototypes to show customers what's possible. And with things like I won't mention the names on here because they're not obviously sponsored or whatever, but you guys have all used them. You can build fully fledged applications, right, that can go almost into production. I would say they're good enough quality that as a prototype, completely unreal, right, Sean?
100%. And then when you've got something taking care of the identity for you, it just makes prototype development that much simpler.
Unreal.
Sounds like a smart move rather than trying to refactor or fix those problems once you realize you've got a great idea. Let's just get it right from the start.
Yes.
Lovely. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate your time and some great insights today, and look forward to talking again soon.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you very much.
Cheers.